They sat in rows, side by side, chatting about gladiator games and grain prices, all while their bare backsides dangled above a shared gutter. But what they didn't expect was the hiss, the sting, and the sudden eruption of fire from beneath. Welcome to Wyrd History, where the past is stranger than fiction. And today we're descending into one of the filthiest, most terrifying corners of the ancient world, the Roman latrine. At first glance, Roman toilets seem surprisingly modern. Public restrooms lined with stone benches, sophisticated sewage systems, and even running water. But beneath this architectural achievement was a hellscape of parasites, deadly gases, and explosive surprises that could, quite literally, burn you alive. Forget polite privacy. Roman toilets were communal, open-air affairs where men and women sat together on long marble benches with keyhole-shaped holes. No partitions, no doors, and often no shame. A single sponge on a stick, soaked in vinegar, was shared for wiping. Sanitary? Not exactly. But the real horrors lay below. A putrid mix of excrement, fermented gases, rats, and worse. Something that made using the toilet a genuine life or death risk. Let's lift the lid on this ancient nightmare. To understand just how strange Roman toilet culture was, we need to let go of modern ideas about privacy and sanitation. In ancient Rome, using the toilet wasn't a solitary act. It was a public ritual. Imagine walking into a grand open chamber of polished stone. Lining the walls are benches with keyhole-shaped openings, spaced just a couple of feet apart. There are no stalls, no partitions, and no doors. You sit shoulder to shoulder with neighbors, friends, even strangers, everyone taking care of their bodily needs while chatting about gladiator games, gossip, or the price of grain. Romans even conducted business deals while using the bathroom. To them, this wasn't shameful. It was simply part of public life. Most of these toilets emptied into the massive Cloaca Maxima, Rome's ancient sewer system. The waste was carried off by water channeled from aqueducts, ingenious for the time, but not exactly airtight. These sewers were open to the air and often vented directly upward through the toilet holes. The result? A constant waft of warm, methane-rich gases, and sometimes far worse, because what lived and died in those sewers didn't always stay below. Something terrifying was bubbling up. It sounds like urban legend, but ancient sources confirm it. Roman toilets exploded. Picture this: you squat over the stone seat, sigh in relief, and suddenly a burst of flame erupts beneath you, scorching your most sensitive parts. This was no metaphor. The buildup of methane gas, a natural byproduct of decomposing waste, could ignite under the right conditions. And it did. Ancient writers like Seneca and Pliny the Elder documented sudden combustions in the sewers. The combination of methane, hydrogen sulfide, and ammonia, all trapped in the tight spaces of Roman plumbing, created a natural bomb. A dropped oil lamp or spark from a torch could be enough to set the entire chamber ablaze. Some historians believe these blasts were so common that public latrines gained a reputation for fiery accidents. One Roman military camp recorded such an event, injuring multiple soldiers when a latrine explosion launched burning waste into the air. To mitigate the risk, some latrines added vents or placed bowls of water under the seats, hoping to absorb the gases, but it was far from foolproof. You didn't just risk disease or embarrassment in a Roman toilet, you risked getting roasted alive. If fire wasn't bad enough, the ancient Roman latrine came with another unthinkable threat: rats and snakes, and they didn't stay below. The warm, wet tunnels of Rome's sewers created the perfect breeding ground for vermin. Rats, frogs, and insects thrived in the muck, but it was the snakes that truly terrified people. Stories circulated of men sitting peacefully when, without warning, something slithered up from the darkness and bit them where the sun didn't shine. Pliny the Elder mentioned cases of sewer creatures emerging from latrines, and some Roman texts even warned of toilet serpents. While we can't confirm how often this happened, the fear was real enough that people took precautions, making loud noises before sitting, carrying sticks to stir the hole, or tapping the stone to scare anything lurking below. Rats were perhaps more common and more aggressive. Attracted by the warmth, the filth, and discarded food waste, they would chew through stone, climb vertical surfaces, and occasionally surprise the unfortunate soul mid-relief. Imagine it. You're mid-conversation in a packed latrine, and suddenly a rat launches itself upward, tail first, through the hole. Privacy was the least of your concerns. If you thought the seating situation was bad, wait until you hear about Roman toilet paper, or rather, the lack of it. Instead of paper, Romans used a torsorium, a sponge attached to a wooden stick. After finishing their business, they would dip the sponge in a bucket of water mixed with vinegar or salt, give themselves a careful wipe, rinse the sponge, and leave it behind for the next user. Yes, it was shared. The torsorium was the public toilet's grimy communal tool, passed from person to person without individual ownership. In busy cities like Rome or Pompeii, dozens, if not hundreds, of people might use the same sponge in a day. Hygiene? Questionable at best. Many historians believe the spread of diseases like typhoid, dysentery, and parasitic infections was accelerated by these communal cleaning sticks. To make matters worse, there were no gloves, no soap, and no understanding of germ theory. One careless wipe or an improperly rinsed sponge could mean illness or death. And if the sponge wasn't placed back in the vinegar bucket, well, imagine reaching under the bench and grabbing a dry, used one. Roman ingenuity had its limits. Ancient Roman latrines weren't just uncomfortable, they were dangerous breeding grounds for disease. The Romans had no knowledge of bacteria or viruses. Despite their advanced engineering, they didn't understand that sewage carried pathogens. Public toilets, especially in large cities, were often contaminated with intestinal parasites, worms, and bacteria like E. coli. A simple visit to the toilet could expose you to everything from dysentery to cholera. Archaeologists have even found evidence of whipworm and roundworm eggs in ancient latrine remains, some from toilets used regularly by Roman elites. The constant exposure to shared waste, reused sponges, and contaminated water made infection almost inevitable. What's more, the water used to rinse the torsorium or flush waste often recycled from nearby baths or fountains, creating a feedback loop of filth. The more people used the toilet, the more polluted the water became, and the greater the risk to everyone involved. And because many toilets were located near food markets or homes, cross-contamination was rampant. Rome may have been a marvel of civilization, but even its finest public amenities quietly spread suffering from the bottom up. The bathroom wasn't just unpleasant, it was a death trap in disguise. As if fire, rats, snakes, and disease weren't enough, Romans also believed their toilets were haunted. In the ancient world, the boundary between the living and the dead was thin, especially in places tied to filth, decay, and the underworld. Latrines, dark and echoing with unseen noises, were believed to be entry points for restless spirits and malevolent gods. Some Romans invoked Cloacina, the goddess of the sewers, hoping she'd keep them safe. Others feared lemures, vengeful ghosts of the unburied dead, who were said to rise from the underworld through cracks in the earth, like those beneath the toilet seat. Terrified of spiritual attacks, many people carved protective symbols or hung amulets inside the latrine. Archaeologists have even discovered curse tablets, thin lead sheets inscribed with magical pleas, buried in the latrines themselves. These weren't always to protect against demons either. Some were requests to the gods to punish cheating lovers or to cause constipation in enemies. The latrine was more than a place to relieve yourself. It was a spiritually volatile zone where the wrong word or a forgotten prayer might just invite a haunting, or worse. With so many dangers lurking in public toilets, you'd think the Romans would avoid them entirely. But no, they doubled down, appointing latrine attendants to maintain order. Unfortunately, their tools were limited and their job disgusting. These attendants, often enslaved people or the lowest-ranking laborers, were tasked with cleaning the seats, managing the water flow, and ensuring the sponge on a stick was rinsed between users. Some even stood guard to scare off rats or warn of rising gas. But the truth is, there was only so much they could do. Wealthy citizens might carry personal sponges, avoid public restrooms altogether, or pay for access to private latrines in bathhouses. But for the majority of Romans, the public toilet was unavoidable. Architects tried to improve ventilation by adding holes in walls or ceilings to let gases escape. Others experimented with raising the toilet bench or adding shallow basins under the seat to trap sewer fumes. But none of these measures fully solved the core problem: the open, communal sewer system feeding and breathing beneath the latrines. For all its might and innovation, Rome never truly conquered the chaos beneath its own streets. As if explosive gas, disease, and rats weren't bad enough, there were rare cases when toilets themselves became tools of murder and sabotage. In some Roman households, particularly those of the elite, indoor latrines were tucked away inside villas. While private and seemingly safer, they made for vulnerable entry points. There are scattered accounts of assassins or thieves entering homes through sewer tunnels, sneaking into the residence via the toilet hole when no one was watching. One Roman nobleman was said to have been poisoned through his toilet water, a targeted attack meant to bypass the scrutiny of food tasters. Whether fact or fearful fiction, such stories gained traction in Roman society, feeding into the broader anxiety that toilets were dangerous places, not just physically, but politically. And then there were tales of toilet collapses, where poorly maintained stone benches cracked under heavy use or shoddy construction. In crowded bathhouses or forums, a single collapse could mean multiple injuries, or worse. What was supposed to be a simple act of relief could become a trapdoor to the underworld, whether by fire, pestilence, poison, or plummeting stone. Rome's toilets were terrifying in every sense. Today, we marvel at Roman engineering, their aqueducts, their roads, their towering colosseums. But beneath all that glory was a sewer system so dangerous, so chaotic, it turned one of the most basic human acts into a gamble with death. The latrine was a place of conversation, superstition, and survival, a place where gas could ignite, creatures could strike, and curses might rise from the dark. The Romans, for all their sophistication, were at the mercy of the muck beneath their feet, and yet they accepted it. They designed temples to sewer gods. They wrote poems about public toilets. They even found dark humor in their misfortune. The Roman world embraced the filth because it had to, because civilization, no matter how grand, still needs to go. So, the next time you enter a clean, private restroom with running water, soap, and flushing porcelain, give thanks. You're not sitting beside a senator discussing grain taxes. You're not sharing a sponge with a stranger. And most importantly, your toilet isn't on fire. If you like this story, like and subscribe for more bizarre truths from the past, because sometimes history stinks. Place your comments below